Hello everybody and welcome to the Yogi Valley YouTube channel. So today discussing what is the ego really? So more recently, when we describe someone as having a big ego, we tend to associate the ego with like if we would say, oh, he's got or she's got or they've got a really big ego, we tend to associate that with them sort of having a very high opinion of themselves. So, oh, they think they're brilliant. They think they're the best thing ever. But in sort of spiritual terms, in like mindfulness kind of terms, and the way that Eckhart Tolle describes the ego in the Power of Now, um, it's a little bit deeper than that, and it doesn't necessarily lean towards a positive outlook on yourself. The ego can get hold of negativity and turn that into a personality as well, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But the description of the ego and kind of the best way that I learned to understand it was through Eckhart Tolle's description of it, in which he had the realization when he was going through a big bout of suffering that he can't live with himself any longer. And there was a realization that if he can't live with himself, then there must be a duality that has taken place, the he and the himself that he can't live with. So when we talk of the ego in sort of mindfulness, spirituality, in terms of presence, we're talking about the himself that you can't live with, or herself, or their self. So in Eckhart Tolle's case, and in many people's cases, the self that you can't live with doesn't think very highly of you. And it sort of says loads of negative things to you all the time. So that self that can't be lived with is a sort of accumulation of repetitive thought patterns and sort of emotional movements related to the thought patterns regarding an image you have of yourself. Okay, so a good way to describe it is in more modern times, the phenomena of like social media, right? So you sort of have yourself, who you view yourself as, and then you have the portrayal of yourself on Instagram or whatever, TikTok, your whatever social media that you're using. So there's a duality there. There's the self that, perhaps isn't quite doing as well or as happy as could be thought of on social media, and then there's the reality of who you actually are. So if you dial that back even one more, then there is the reality of who you actually are, which is essentially the ego. So the thoughts, the mind patterns, the relationship you have with yourself. But if there is a relationship, it means that there's an object and a subject of the relationship, and it can be vice versa, right? So the question is, which are you? Are you the accumulation of thoughts and oh, I should have said that to that guy, or oh, we didn't do very well there. Some people even sort of in the kind of voice in the head speaking like in that way, like a subject object conversation, like, oh, we were rubbish. Or sometimes the ego will say, you were rubbish there. Like in that situation, or the way you just like communicated and stuff like that, it can really be like that clear. And if you relate to that, that's not an issue, but it's just a noticing. So if the ego is that sort of idea we have of ourselves, what is the other thing? What is that watcher? The I, right? I can't live with myself. Who is the I and who is the self? So when we think about, well, not think about really, but when we embody presence and become present and try and be so completely in the moment that there isn't thought and there isn't like a big emotional movement, there's just that clarity. That is the part of us that we're trying to directly interface with the world. We want the I rather than the self. Usually, the self is in the background, then it goes through the filter of the self and all of our likes, dislikes, triggers, past trauma, and then it gets all like skewed and like a kaleidoscope. The light goes through it, and then it meets the world in whatever way it's been kind of manipulated, and vice versa. It comes from the world through all of that, and then meets the kind of self. So the goal of spirituality and presence is to remove the filter, remove the kaleidoscope, so the light directly reaches out and the out directly reaches the light without that disturbance. And that disturbance, that self, is the ego. So it's not just that someone thinks they're the best. The ego loves being the worst. Like, I'm sure everybody's met someone who, like, say you get unwell, they were unwell, 5 times worse, and like, there's that sort of negativity competition. And if the ego can't be the best, it will just be the worst. Loves that. So it's not necessarily just positive, and it can oscillate. It's not always negative. It's not always positive. It is just the relationship that you have with the self. So the way out of the ego is to begin to not identify with thought. Ego only really exists in thought. It's not anywhere else. Like, the ego is not sitting next to me. The ego isn't up the road and I'll go and meet it. It only exists in the mind, and it predominantly exists in past and future. You were rubbish then. There's anxiety about a future situation, and your imagery of yourself in those situations failing or being the best. So to exit the ego, you enter the now. And it becomes quite simple, really, when you just begin to step out of those thought patterns and just begin to listen to your surroundings and just look at what is around you. Feel your breath. And if the mind comes in with some story about something, then just bring it back to something that is happening now. Feel your feet, feel your hands, and interface with the world without having to run this analysis all the time. Do I like this? Do I not? Doesn't matter. Just be there. And then an intelligence that is unknowable, that is unfathomable really to the mind. If you try and think about it, it's elusive. It's like when you get something in your eye and you try and look at it and it kind of moves out of the way. It can only be experienced through presence. So to step out of the ego, you step out of time. Ego exists in time. You as a person exists in no time. Just this, the now. So I hope that helps your understanding of what is meant in terms of ego in spirituality. And if you have any other sort of spiritual, mindfulness, presence related questions that you'd like me to answer, feel free to leave them in the comments below. All right, guys, thank you very much. Have a lovely rest of your day, and namaste.